Well, earlier I spoke with Mark Danner, the author of The Massacre at El Mozote, and I began by asking him whether President Funes's apology is enough for the families of the victims who do want justice.
I think it's very unlikely. The massacre happened in December 1981. It's 30 years ago. And I think it's useful, it's salutary for the government to officially apologize. I think that's not a small thing. It's a considerable thing, especially when you realize that for many, many, many years, the government simply denied that anything had happened in El Mozote. So it's substantial and it's real that the president did it. But I think the question of justice, if that means actually prosecuting those who were responsible for the killings, I think that is a very long way off and perhaps never will happen. The immediate commander who apparently committed these crimes, Domingo Monterosa, was of course killed not long after by the guerrillas. So he did find a kind of justice of his own, but many other of those responsible certainly haven't been prosecuted or punished in any way, as is true of many of the crimes committed during the Salvadoran Civil War.
During the Civil War, the United States gave billions of dollars in military and economic aid to the Salvadorian-led military government. How do you think 20 years on the United States comes out of this? Have they accepted any responsibility for what happened?
Well, the U.S. did publish, and this is now more than a decade ago, an investigation by a number of former high State Department officials that did indeed trace responsibility for, well, it's more accurate to say knowledge of these particular crimes, and did admit that high officials in the government did know at the time what was going on and what happened, not just with massacres like El Mozote, but killings, death squad killings, which of course killed thousands of Salvadorans. These death squads were run out of the government. They were part of the Treasury Police, they were part of the Army, and so on. The U.S. claimed repeatedly that these crimes were committed by unknown assailants. It was an open secret to all journalists working in the country who was doing them, who was responsible for them, and of course the United States knew as well. So the U.S. in effect has admitted that it knew, which is a good thing. On the other hand, you know, the U.S. aid, in a sense, made it possible for many of those crimes to be committed.
If you look at the legacy of El Salvador's civil war 20 years on, what do you see in the country?
Well, I see a war that was enormously bloody, cataclysmically, catastrophically bloody, in part because it was a proxy war that was fought between these two great protagonists, the Soviet Union and the United States. And the war probably would have been horrible without that geostrategic aspect. But because you had these larger outside players who were funding the war, you got a degree of violence, a degree of ruthlessness that I think you would not have seen otherwise.
That was Mark Danner talking to me earlier. Mexican police paraded a suspected leader in the La Familia drug cartel on Monday. Police